This week on Gymwright Live, we interview Jim Crowell of OPEX to learn how to hire and fire like a pro. Quick announcement before we get into it. Next week, we'll be launching our brand new and completely free 2019 Gym Sales and Marketing Planner. This is a series of worksheets and tutorials with videos designed to help you craft your annual growth plan for your gym. And in that, you're also going to be getting our Perceived Value Builder. This is our simple and powerful method of bringing in better qualified members, keeping your members longer, and creating a more engaging atmosphere for everyone in your gym community. So if you'd like to get a copy of our 2019 Gym Sales and Marketing Planner when we launch it next week, visit gymwright.com/2019 plan, and you can get on the wait list there. We will email it to you as soon as we launch. I do that right now if you are at your computer or have your phone handy so you don't forget. And for all of you listening to this via podcast, be sure to check out the video version of the interview at gymwright.com. And if you're enjoying the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and written review. If you'd like to watch the show live, we record every Friday in the network, which is our free private Facebook group for the motivated gym owners of the world to share their best tactics and strategies to grow their businesses. Join the network and get in on the conversation. All right, back to the show. All right. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Gymwright Live. I'm your host, Marcus Guersey, and this week we welcome to the show's special guest, the CEO of OPEX, Mr. Jim Crowell. Jim, absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, man. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. We're going to be getting into a topic today that we get asked questions about, whether it's from our coaching clients or it pops up the network now and again, that I think is not addressed often enough. You know, we're going to be talking about how to hire and fire correctly. You've got some really unique experience, I think, with your background, and we'll get into that here in a second. But we're going to be addressing this because at the end of the day, you know, the coaches and your staff ultimately in this business are our product, right? This is who our clients are interfacing with every day. And if we have, you know, someone who's not on board and not willing to show up to staff meetings or not rowing in the same direction, it can cause a lot bigger problems, I think, than a lot of people initially think it can. So I'm really excited to dive in with you. So that said, tell us a little bit about yourself, Jim. You've got a background you've built several businesses from gyms to now being the CEO of OPEX. How did all this come to be?
Well, I think end of the day, I just really have a passion for understanding business. So I really enjoy investigating what's going on. And that started when I was probably 13, 14 years old. I was trading stock when I was really young, just, you know, getting crushed sometimes, making some money sometimes. So I was really fascinated by how it worked. I took that into Penn State and did finance economics at Penn State and loved the concept of understanding how the world financial markets worked. That moved me into actually going to work for a hedge fund right out of college, traded commodities, natural gas, crude oil, all that stuff. And that gave me a real education on how the world works, if I'm being honest, because that connected me into not only financial markets, but how those derivative products actually impacted the communities that they were a part of. So you can imagine how impactful something like crude oil is on the world. And so I really appreciated understanding how that world worked. But, you know, as many do, I recognized that I wanted to move more into a place that I got more fulfillment out of. I was an athlete my entire life. I played tennis at college, and I love to train. You know, that's something that I've always loved to do. I've tried all kinds of different versions of it, and it took me back into the CrossFit era because I really enjoyed understanding how to train hard. You know, so I got into CrossFit like so many. I was living in Austin, Texas at that time. So Jeremy Teal, Travis Hawley, all those guys, Miles McGriff, you know, just a good opportunity to understand that game.
Yep.
What I recognized about CrossFit is that there was no barrier to it. There was no barrier to entry to it. And my business brain is just going, how in the world am I not playing this game? I can open up a gym for $25K. I can make my money back in 3 months, you know, and then you can make this thing go. And this was 2009 and early 2010 when I was really starting to understand that. And so moved from Austin, out of the hedge fund up to Pittsburgh, opened up a CrossFit gym up in Pittsburgh. Partner and me built that into 2 gyms, 500 members, really just kind of learning how this whole game was played. But I loved working with people. Our team loved working with people. We loved to be in that environment. which is really, I think, helpful for the conversation today, because I've seen when that works and when it doesn't. I've made mistakes. I've made good plays. It's just, you're constantly going back and forth with it. And after 4 or so years there, I sold my stake to my business partner and then moved out here to OPEX, frankly, to be a coach. And so I coached for a little bit, but just, again, the business hat goes back on right when I got out to Arizona. And I found I got really passionate about helping these coaches and athletes succeed. And about 1.5 years into that, I really started to build out the gym license program and, spent about 1 year putting that together. And that's kind of when I moved into the CEO role here and then kicked off the gym licensing program for OPEX gyms. And just, let me preface this whole thing. Our gyms are a personalization concept, so we're 1-to-1, and then they train in a small group. So a little bit different than a group setting, but I've had experience in both. And they're the same concepts, which is cool.
Right.
So that kind of leads me here today and to our conversation.
Awesome, man. Well, you've got a great story, and I think your experience is going to lend a very unique blend to our audience here, because we're not just dealing with a gym owner who's just been in the gym business. You've been in a variety of other different arenas in the business world and seen success there. So I think taking all this together and culminating into this conversation should be really valuable. So let's jump right in. So let's start with hiring first. So I know you believe mission and vision play a big role in the hiring process. How is that?
I'm a huge believer that the team has to be completely bought in to not just a product that you're serving, but to the underlying reason that you're serving the product. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if it's a group training facility, what is the true mission that you're on? And if that's, we want to make people healthier, help them have fun every single day, and give them kind of that third space, right? Like Starbucks became the third space between work and home.
Cheers.
Is becoming, yeah, exactly. The gym is becoming that third space for many, many, many people. The problem comes in is if you're hiring people that don't buy into that. And I've done that too many times, unfortunately. You might try to hire a skill, and unfortunately, that's not going to give you the most passion, the most hard work, the least friction in terms of working with somebody. So I believe that first and foremost, you need to hire, essentially, we call it hiring bedside manner and teaching skill. It's of that concept where they need to buy in 100% to what you are trying to work on in the world. What's the problem you're solving, and how are they helping you achieve that?
I love how you said that, hiring for bedside manner and teaching skill. I think that's something that for a lot of the coaches in the space and newer gym owners, they find themselves trying to they think that the more certification someone has, or the longer someone's been coaching, or the more experience in general they have, that's going to make them a better staff member. And it ultimately, I think, is proven to many of us that that's not the case. I've made that mistake more than once myself too, where I hired someone who on paper and technically was way better than any of the other people on the staff. But they weren't bought into really what we were about, our driving why. And that made it really challenging when we were trying to put together staff meetings. He's like, I got other stuff going on today. And it's like, what? This is a required staff meeting. Yeah, well, I couldn't move my haircut. And it's just like, that is just not acceptable at all. And it does my end. And also the reason people are showing up is not just because of how your bag of tricks is around teaching the squat. It's there because they want to feel cared for and they want to have a good time getting in shape, right? The technical stuff is almost secondary, I think, versus this. So
yeah, I agree. I don't think it's technically secondary. I think absolutely secondary.
It is secondary.
We've got a huge belief here that relationships matter more than anything.
100%.
And is a coach able to build a relationship? Yes or no? If they can't build a relationship, all that education goes to zero. Now, there are some coaches that as they continue to educate themselves, they recognize how that plays into the relationship and they're outstanding. Right. But too many coaches think that it's the technical, whether it be programming or movement or nutrition, that's going to get those clients to buy in. It's just not the case.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Agree with you 100%. We talk about it on the show all the time. We're in the relationship business and that comes first. All right. Now, do you have any tips on the actual job posting, like what gym owners can do to draw in the right types of people to be interviewed?
Yeah, I think that gym owners, specifically at the local gym level, are getting crushed by people like Orange Theory, because there's a lot of resources at the Orange Theory level that help them put the job description, the job recommendation, etc., out to the market. Mm-hmm. The really interesting thing is that those job recommendations are usually really well written. And so what the local gym owner needs to recognize is that they need to take a piece of the playbook and say, what is it that's attracting talent to these other gyms? Mm-hmm. Whether that be Orange Theory, any big franchise that's out there right now. I think that in a job description, you have to start with the emotional hook. So you don't just start by saying, I need a coach. You start by talking about the problem that you're solving in the world, and you get somebody who wants to solve that problem with you interested in reading down the page. I see too many of these job descriptions. Well, by the way, I see a lot of people not even doing a job description, so right. That's a starting point. But assuming that you are going to put a job description up, you have to get somebody bought into at least the base methodology that you have. Because let's say that you think you're going to get 10 people interested in this job description, and I've seen gyms get 2 people interested or 50 people interested. Mm-hmm. Let's say you think you're going to get 10. You want the top 6 to be, at your door giving you their resume. And to do that, you have to connect with them emotionally. So let's say that you want to solve the obesity problem. That's your shtick. And in your gym, you're doing that by A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. That's what you're laying out up front. Not long, just quick hit. And then once you can get to that point, the right people will keep reading down the page to understand what the coaching position looks like. So tier 2, that would be where the more specific components of the job role come in, and they need to tie back into that tier 1 problem that you're solving. And then anything at the end, quite honestly, is going to be a little bit fluff, right? Because it's right. Just they're either in or they're out at that point. They've made their decision prior to even reading the end of the coaching stipulation. If they're into the mission and they know that it's a group coach to do group classes, they're either getting ready to send you their resume or they've left because they're not the right fit. So I think that connecting to them that way is really important up front.
I love that. I mean, in essence, what we're doing is we're actually marketing our job posting rather than just making it, hey, looking for a qualified coach who's well-versed in ABC. Instead, create a narrative, create a story that someone's going to buy into and start and lead with that, and then the technical piece being second. So I love that approach. Yeah. Now, a little bit more specific on that. Are there any online platforms or tools that you think work really well for the gym business? Have you seen whether ZipRecruiter or any of these types of platforms or networks people can tap into? Because we get asked that all the time. Where do I find people? Where do I even go?
Yeah. I don't think it's the platform that answers the question. I think it's the network that the coaches and the owners create that will either help them draw in a coach or not. So I'm a huge believer that every gym owner needs to constantly be building a bullpen. Mm-hmm. You constantly have to be reaching out to people, understanding where the talent is and keeping talent close. And I think that not enough gym owners do that. So I find that the best coaching relationships come through some sort of either referral or network, or by network, I mean close proximity groups that you're working with, not bullshit networks, right? Where you go pitch something for 5 seconds and then walk out the door. That's not what I mean. Those are going to be the best platforms that I've seen for folks, but you can generally get volume of people back from either, like you said, ZipRecruiter or, Indeed.com is right. We network decently well. Mm-hmm. But I think that the best coaches are going to come through the network that you're building. And when you post the description on your website and then in your social platforms, you should get a couple of people excited about it from there. Mm-hmm. If it takes you posting into something like Indeed, I don't think you've built a strong enough network. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't great coaches who come through there. I would just prioritize your internal network first, because I see the best coaches coming through there, and I see the best long-term successful gyms are constantly making that network bigger and cultivating talent through that network. And I don't mean taking a client who shows a little interest and making them a full-time coach. I'm talking about putting people through a program, whether you want to call it an intern program or whatever, and working so that you always have people ready to step in when you need it. It takes work, but you're going to get better talent who's more prepared to run your system, who buys into your system better.
Yep. And I think the piece about the work, I think is important because I find it, or I mean, as we all know, a lot of gym owners are pretty strapped for time, especially when people are in those first couple of years and maybe are still kind of getting their feet underneath them with the business and time management overall and priorities and all that. And, one of the number one complaints they have is, I don't have enough time. That sounds great, but time. And I think it's just reprioritizing that and making that a much bigger priority, because ultimately most people get in the business because of it's the coaching that sets us apart. It's the quality and all that. It's like, well, then if that's the case, then why aren't you investing more time and energy into making your product better by hiring better people rather than just, okay, well, Steve from the 7 a.m. class is kind of interested and I think he's thinking about getting his level 1. Come on in. And taking a more, I think, proactive approach to it. So awesome advice.
I'm not a believer in, quid pro quo. I don't think that, why can't I think of the word? Essentially trading. I don't think that bartering and trading a membership for a coach is a good idea.
I agree.
And I know a lot of coaches think that, but it just makes no sense to me. Like, you need to define the value of the membership and the value that you're asking for from a coach. And it's very possible that the coach should be paid more than their membership. But the gym owner sees it that, well, I can save $100, $200, whatever the number is. The problem is that now the value proposition is out of whack and the coach is going to create resentment over time because they know that they're getting screwed.
100%.
That's what slowly starts to pinprick that coach to owner relationship that makes somebody say, you know what, screw this. I'm going to go open my own gym. Because they're not being valued. And believe me, I've made mistakes there before. So I've seen it go bad,
Right. But
you really have to pay attention to the value that you're offering for the service that is being required.
No question. That whole concept of, let's just basically barter for coaching and all that. I get it when you're first getting off the ground, or maybe you have no concept yet of what we're even doing. We were just passionate. We kickstarted this thing basically. Like you said, hey, I can max out some credit cards. 3 weeks later, doors are open. We're rocking and rolling. I didn't know what I was doing. That's one thing. But if you're really trying to grow the business and professionalize this thing, and you want to have expectations of your staff to make sure they are always following the opening and closing procedures and following the standards on class and, requiring them to show up for staff meetings and the things that are going to actually make your business run like a real business, you have to treat them like a professional. And bartering is not a professional exchange. We have to make sure that the relationship is respected in both directions, like you said. So awesome advice on that too. Now, okay, so next piece on here I think would be resumes. What about resumes? Are they still relevant in this business? I see this get skipped constantly.
I think that they're really relevant, because if somebody's willing to send me a resume, they're at least willing to do the work to do a resume. I basically follow a protocol that says, are you a good fit for the business? If you're unwilling or unable to create a resume, I don't think that you're going to be able to interact with somebody who has a 6-figure income. Mm-hmm. And so I want to understand if you can tangibly create something like that. And I've seen garbage resumes, but at least people are making an effort to put something together. Also, I'm really curious to see how the resume differs from the interview. So I'm really curious to say, okay, these are the bullets that you're telling me that you're really good at, because they're not going to put anything on that they're bad at, or at least it would be a terrible idea to do that. So if I can see that as a starting point, it gives me an understanding to say, A, do I want to talk to you or not? And I look at tons of resumes that we don't offer interviews to. And then based off of that information, if I do speak to you, I'm going through this thing and asking digging questions to understand if you're legit or not. And if I find anything that breaks, what you tried to tell me on the resume, you're out, because that's not the business that I want to run. And so I'm looking for it to solidify if they're the right fit or not. I think it's really important.
Awesome. Now, what kinds of questions should you ask when you're interviewing someone? Start with that.
Yeah, to go back to the digging questions, this is really an interesting one. We could have some really good conversation here. I think that what you're trying to do is to understand what they inherently understand about coaching. And to not make that a gray statement, You need to get under the layers and under the surface a little bit. So if somebody says, I coached for 2 years at CrossFit XYZ. Oh, okay, but what does that mean? You know, did you coach 1 hour, 2 days a week? Did you coach 10 hours, 5 days a week? And what did you learn that was the most successful at keeping clients engaged, at building relationships, and at ultimately retaining clients? Mm-hmm. And the coaches that can walk through that, and they don't need to answer it extremely articulately because they're not sure what the question is going to be up front. But the coaches that can kind of look up into their mind and say, this is what I learned from all of that experience, and here's what I've implemented into my coaching practice. Those are the coaches that I want to take down to the next rung of the hiring process. Mm-hmm. Because they can, it's not that they're following a procedure only. They know what works and what doesn't, and that's valuable. To go back to your point on education, they might be very smart, but if they have no concept of what keeps a client in the gym, that's going to be hard for them to just learn on their own.
Right.
So that gets back to the bedside manner. So ask digging questions. And by digging, I mean ask why they did something, or ask what they learned in their 2 years of experience, or directly ask them, what have you learned is the best way to retain and engage your clients? You'll learn so much by asking that open-ended digging question that if you're paying attention, which I have seen, coaches or owners not pay attention in an interview, but if you're really paying attention, you will see, A, if their answers on their resume are realistic, and B, you'll understand if they can really understand the mission that you want and if they fit into that. It's so important.
Yeah, no kidding. And if you don't mind, I'd actually like to go a little bit deeper on the actual interview piece with you. What are some additional questions or tips you can give to someone who's trying to structure a good interview?
Yeah, let me try to hit your audience the best here. So let's talk group training. Yep. Let's talk relationship building. Let's talk follows the system, right? Mm-hmm. I know those are big points you want all your coaches to follow. So if I'm in an interview and I know that those points are top of my priority list, I need to pick on things that are in their resume and dig under those things to understand if they're legitimate. So let's say somebody says, you won't generally see this, by the way, but let's say somebody says, I retained 98 out of 100 clients over 2 years. Number one, that's a call right away if you see that on a resume, because they took the time to actually understand what you're looking for and not just how awesome they are as a coach. But if I want to dig into that, I'm going to say, okay, does that mean that you actually retain them for every month over 2 years? What are some of the systems that you put in play to retain your clients at that level? And I want it to be open, because if they're bullshitting me, they won't be able to answer the question with any type of elegance. And then I might go down to, well, how would you define the relationship that you built with these clients? And then the question at the end that I really, really am interested in, what did you learn from the 2 that walked out? And if a coach can truly walk through that with me, that's really powerful. That's a level of awareness that most coaches have no concept of. No concept. And so what I'm trying to learn is, if I want my clients to become more conscious in their training and more aware of what they're doing in and out of the gym, coaches are going to have to push that. And I need to understand if these coaches that I'm bringing in can do that. I don't want to have to teach them all of that. I can help them hone skills, but just as well as I do, Marcus, some people just are never going to be aware.
Yep. That's the part I can't teach. I can't teach you to care. I can't teach your awareness. We can teach you all the other stuff, right?
Yes, exactly.
Beautiful.
Actually, what's really interesting, why do you think there's so much coaching education on how to teach a back squat? Because it's tangible, right?
Right.
But why is there so little education on building deep relationships with people?
Yeah, it's the thing.
Right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Now, do you have any thoughts on coaches' compensation or payment structure, contracts, performance agreements, scorecards?
Yeah, walking through the interview process, let's say that you've got somebody that you're really excited about, you think they align really well. If you are hiring coaches without contracts, you're asking to be crushed. At some point. It's going to happen somewhere, because even if you have a contract, you might walk into a buzzsaw. But what I want to recognize is the coach who really wants to be in. If a coach isn't willing to sign an agreement saying, here's what I'm going to deliver for you, and the business then has to deliver back, then they're not really in this thing, right? Mm-hmm. And so you want to be careful not to be such a prick on the contract that you lose trust. I've been there. But you want it to be clear of what they have to deliver, and you want it to be clear on what happens if. Okay, so for example, and I understand how difficult non-competes and all that stuff are. So for anybody listening, non-competes are hard to enforce. They have to be super specific. And even if they're super specific, you might not win it in the end. So the point of the contract is to set expectations with your coaches. So just know that you're not necessarily going to be able to hold them to this thing, but you want the expectation to be if they walk out, they're not taking clients with them. They're not going to compete with your exact client set. All that stuff needs to be in a contract. In terms of payment, I think it really depends on what they're doing. So if we're talking about coaching classes, I'll just be honest and say, I think that coaches need to make more money than they generally make coaching classes. You know, so if a coach is making $20 an hour and they're trying to do this full time, we have to remember that they're probably only doing 3 or 4 classes a day max. Mm-hmm. That's not going to be enough for them to be a professional coach. So if we're talking about professionalism, which OPEX, we have a deep belief in wanting to create professionalism in coaching, mm-hmm. you are going to need to, as an owner, be able to walk them into a conversation that says, in 1 year, I want you to be here, dollars wise per month, right? Because everybody's going off of, can I pay my bills? Mm-hmm. And in 2 years, if you can do this, I want you to be here. And in 3 years, I want you to be here. And there might be a roof somewhere, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. But if you can't walk them step by step, I don't think that you as an owner are giving them an opportunity to succeed. So now here's where some people disagree with our thoughts. What we do in OPEX gyms on almost everybody that comes in is we offer them a fairly low but safe draw. And if some listeners don't know what a draw is, that's basically they get paid a certain dollar amount until they earn more than that dollar amount, and then the draw just goes away. Because we want them to feel safe in the beginning, but we want to incentivize them to grow a client book. And keep in mind, we're personalized, so they can truly work one-to-one with the client and understand the revenue that's coming in. But we're paying them a percentage off of the revenue that's coming in. Mm-hmm. So we can understand from a gross margin percentage standpoint what the business should look like as it's getting spun up. But we want to make sure that they can come in and be safe in the beginning while they're building a client book. And then the expectation just goes, hey, we need you to be at X clients by here. Here's what I'm going to do to drive you clients. Here's what you can do to drive referrals. Here's how I'm going to pay you on referrals, all that good stuff, so that they're clear. If somebody comes in with full clarity and then in a year, either they haven't delivered or the gym hasn't delivered, they know what should happen at that point. You know what I mean? And they can leave if they want, or the gym can figure out how to make it work. But if they come in and they have bad expectations, that's where things go bad.
Yeah, and I think that it also has a lot to do with their longevity just overall, right? Much like a member, I don't want to have to keep replacing coaches that I'm burning through every 18 months or so because there's no path forward. There's no way to turn this into a career and stop working at Starbucks and truly become a professional coach. And as the owner, it's your responsibility to be able to cast that vision. So what you said about the 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, the point of that I think is that it's showing them that, look, there is a plan and a path for you to move forward and achieve, A, B, and C milestones income wise. And here are some additional force multipliers that you can use along the way, like our referral system and, whatever else you have in place to be able to make even more if you deliver on these other categories. And making that black and white and being able to put the thought into that ahead of time, I think shows them also that this is a far more professional thing, and they're going to take you, the business, their job far more seriously. You're not going to have coaches strolling in 30 seconds before class is supposed to begin because they respect the policy. They respect that there are rules because you've put them in place because there's a reason for it, right? You're trying to create something. You're trying to make an impact. They're clear on the why. They're clear on their path. And I think the combination of those things is ultimately what's going to create a deeper buy-in, which is going to create a better product. And again, we're coming back to the product. This is all we have. People don't give a shit about the paint on the walls or how new your GHDs are or how many barbells you have relative to their experience and the relationship with the coach there. There are plenty of gyms that have total dog shit setups when it comes to the physical facility, but they've got tier 1 coaches and they're able to do just fine. Now, do I think that they should step up their facility game? Absolutely. But it just goes to show when people are like, look, this is all old equipment, nothing fancy here. It's in like a little dungeon underground somewhere, but the coaching's top tier. People care. People feel like they're seen and they're taken care of. They're safe and they're getting results. You win the game, right? And I think that is, again, I think people are just kind of rushing to, great, well, let's just give you a bunch of classes. And as long as you're not, making people, I'm not having to do customer service calls after your classes, like I'll take that as a win because I'm not having to do them all myself.
Yeah, I think that you brought up some really good points there, and two really stuck out to me. I find that coaches, and let's just go to owners, they need structure and frameworks. There's too much reacting to things that's happening to them. Mm-hmm. And so they work much better when they can say, here's what I'm trying to get across, whether that's in marketing, sales, operations, actually fulfillment of the product. And you hit the nail on the head when you said it gets them back to the why. And I want to expand on that for a second, because if a coach can look at this thing and say, what am I trying to create? That's the brand at the end of the day, right? And too many coaches forget that the brand is what the market thinks of you, not what you think about yourself.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
If you're really trying to make a great brand and you're claiming that your brand has better coaches who build better relationships, who do understand movement and programming, et cetera, better, but you're not taking care of those coaches, your brand is broken. So why do some gyms not get traction on the marketing side? Because they don't exclaim or take action to create a consistent brand. Mm-hmm. So this hiring piece and this working with your team piece is very much something that will bring more clients in faster. Mm-hmm.
No question.
Yeah, and then the other component is really, it's all about, how you sell the vision to that coach. And I'm not saying sell in a negative way. I'm saying you've got to get somebody to see what you see. And I've brought people in too fast in the past, no doubt about it. But if you can help somebody say, this is what the first 3 months look like, and here's how you're going to go. Can you see that? Like, can you see how this is going to work? And here's how I'm going to work with you week by week. And then you better deliver, by the way, or else they will, be upset. And then at 6 months, you should be at about 20 clients, let's go back to group. You should be at about 4 classes a day, 4 days a week. Here's going to be what you're making. Here's how you can make more money. And here's how you can benefit the entire system, which will then benefit you. Mm-hmm. It's like we forget that we have a ton of influence on the coaches that we work with, but we need to use that influence to get them working with us. Mm-hmm. And I think that the more you can align interests, the more that you can set the right expectations, the more that you can set the big picture. That's what the framework needs to look like to build the brand to bring other clients in.
No question, man. And now, while we're on the topic of onboarding, how do you suggest to onboard a new team member if we can kind of lay it out in a series of steps for someone?
Yeah, that's why we like the draw, because we know that we're going to have a period of time where that coach isn't effective, in quotes, right? Mm-hmm. So it's okay. We want to make sure that we give them enough time. And generally, I've seen it be about a month that you really need to train a coach. And ask yourself as a local gym owner, how many of you guys have brought coaches in? It's like, you got that morning class? All right, let's go. Right out of the gate.
You can do 7 a.m., 6 a.m.? Oh, you're hired.
Exactly. And that's how they're hiring folks, which I understand. Yeah. But you have to be with them to walk them through how the system works. And to go a layer higher, you have to know what your system actually should look like. Yeah. So too many gym owners are, again, reactionary, and they just say, okay, as long as the workout's up on the board and I run them through whatever warm-up, I'm okay. Mm-hmm. That's garbage. That's going to destroy the local gym owner. If you're actually talking about building relationships and building better engagement, you need to look at not just a day of how the entire day's worth of classes run. You need to look at what's happening weekly and monthly inside of the gym and how you can combine all those things together. And how could a coach who's coming in and being onboarded possibly have an understanding of what that looks like without there being some training? So let's assume that there's a 1 month onboarding. Probably don't need to call it interning, but similar looking. Mm-hmm. That means that you're going to walk them through how all the processes work. You're going to make sure that they sign an employee handbook walking through all the processes so that they've seen it and exclaim that they understand how it works. Then you're going to walk them through with you coaching classes, right? Like they need to actually be in classes with somebody else so that they can understand what's right, what's wrong, even little things like angles on coaching, right? Like the more experienced coach can really help a newer coach walk through that. And then the little things are extremely important, which means I'm going to go, if I'm the owner having the conversation with the intern, I'm going to walk over and tell Sally this, but I want to say it this way because I know her well enough to know that she'll respond better if I say it this way. Mm-hmm. So the end result, I'm a big outcome guy. The end result that you want at the end of that month is for the coach to be very clear on what the processes look like, be very clear on what your expectations for them is as a coach, and also to start to get to know the people in the classes that they're going to work with. Because the moment that they go solo, they better, James Fitzgerald calls it the manana, right? Like they better be the orchestra conductor day one. Mm-hmm. And if they can't, that's going to be a worse experience for your clients. Right. And it's the pin pricking, right? Like, and then imagine if you do that as an owner 2 or 3 times to the same client over a 6-month period. That's what creates churn.
Right.
So
it damages the relationship, right? We refer to that in our company here. We refer to it as percent frustrated. Right. Mm-hmm. Every time you do that, you increase their percent frustrated. And although it may not cause them to quit right then, or it may not cause them to even complain or say anything right then, what you're doing is you're increasing their percent frustrated. And what it does is it diminishes your relationship and your trust that you put into and worked your butt so hard off over the last, year, 2 years that maybe you were the only one running these classes as you're trying to bring people in. And if you bring someone in who kind of sucks, or they're like, you just threw her in here and she's not this is totally out of line. And we had tempos written on the board and she's like, no, I don't believe in tempos. We're not doing that. Like that completely devalues the system overall. And it ruins that trust, that relationship that was there. And like you said, you do that not just once, but if you do that over and over again, I think it overall steals the magic away from everything that you had built. And this is why a lot of people, when they transition from maybe like 1 or 2 woman or man band to like trying to bring in a team to offset their hours of the day and not have to do all the coaching themselves anymore, that's actually the reason why it doesn't work. It's because the people they put in place weren't really trained well enough to continue on that consistent experience that the members were bought into. That's what was keeping them there. People want that. They don't want that disconnect, that friction point of the new person coming in. That's not their responsibility. That is your responsibility. And if you're not the one who's creating the system and processes to make sure that you're onboarding someone correctly out of respect for your client who's paying for something that they want that same consistency for, then you're kind of crapping the bed here, because it's like a restaurant. Let's say you go to your same restaurant and you love their tomato biscuits. What gets you there every single time you go, every Friday with date night with your wife. And then all of a sudden you go in and you're like, this soup tastes like hell. They're like, oh, we've got a new chef. She'll figure it out soon. It's like, I'm not here to like buy soup for you to figure it out. I'm here because I want the soup that I love so much from when you guys made it. That's what I thought this place was. And now they realize it's the individuals. I'm going to get different experiences at 7 a.m. versus 5 p.m. And then people start saying that, well, I miss you, coach. I miss seeing you. And that's not them just saying, I miss you as a person. That's them saying, I miss the experience that I used to get from you versus what I'm getting now. And I think those are some call signs that a lot of gym owners kind of just glaze right over, that they don't realize. Those are major red flags for us. Yep. And that all comes back to exactly what you said. It's that initial integration and prepping. And in my experience, and when we ran our facilities, what it was, that initial period that we had was of our training, everything was about why. It wasn't just here's the system or here's the process. There was what we needed them to understand. I didn't even care if they didn't memorize the system. I just wanted them to remember why the system goes the way that it does. We'll work on, I know this is 1,000 things at once. We'll get it right, like as far as that's concerned. But if they understand why, they actually got much better, much faster, because I didn't have to now, like you said, it's the bedside versus the skill. The skill's fine. You forgot to turn the lights on before you turn the TV on. Like, we can do that out of order. I can fix that quickly. That's not going to disrupt the experience. But the point is that they're bought into the actual reasoning for the system. Yeah,
beautifully said. I think in today's day and age, every business that most all of our clients are interacting with have user experience. Almost everybody. And I'm talking digital as well. So if you can't create a user experience in person with somebody that beats Amazon.com, you're going to die.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that you're going to go down, because Amazon is going to beat you in every conceivable category. And I know that I'm talking about different industries, but people now have an expectation of what everything that they're paying for should be like in terms of experience. And if you don't deliver that, you're gone. And that's why a lot of local gyms are getting crushed by these franchises that are popping up, not because they're quote unquote better, but because they're more consistent.
Right.
It's the McDonald's effect, right? McDonald's took out countless numbers of local restaurants because the local restaurants couldn't be consistent.
Right. And it had nothing to do with the fact that the local restaurant had an infinitely better burger.
Yes.
It wasn't the point. Right?
Not at all. Yeah.
Consistency. They were able to set the expectation and nail it 100% of the time. And that's what won. Really good point. I love what you said about that's why they're getting crushed. And people, I think, focus on the wrong thing. Yeah, but we're better. We're way better coaches, or our programming's way better. First of all, your consumer doesn't even understand what the hell programming is. So wrong thing to hang your hat on. What they are going to base it off of is their experience. Start with the experience. Again, there are plenty of gyms out there, and I mean, even clients that we work with that are very, very successful with their business and their product, and they will admit this. They're like, I'm not that great of a coach. Like, I just got into training 2 years before I started my deal. But the point is that they were really good at experience and making people feel seen. And that's how they got to 300-400 members. And now they could afford to hire better coaches or go through all the certifications and all that good stuff to raise the chops. Right? But what they focused on was experience, and they'll beat you if you're the most technical guy who has a crummy experience or inconsistent experience. And
I'll be really blunt with these listeners on this call. They will beat you 100% of the time in the long run. 100%. Because at some point, I don't anymore care about my back squat going up. I don't care. Most people in today's day and age don't even care about it going up initially.
In the first place, yeah.
Right. They just want to look better, feel stronger, and have some level of in the gym and out of the gym success. So if your back squat goes up but your knees hurt all the time, you lose. You know, unless you have somebody who's trying to win a back squat competition, then I get it, right? But
sure, 1 out of every 10,000 people.
Right,
great.
Exactly. So I think that to go back to outcomes, right? I think that these gym owners need to think through the outcome that they're trying to achieve every day on the floor. Every day. One of the things that I think is absolutely brilliant, and I think Pat Sherwood said this, is create the best hour of their day.
Yep.
How simple is that? Like, let's just zoom out for a second and ask ourselves, like, what does that really mean? Like, that has nothing to do with a muscle up PR, right? It has everything to do with, I go to this gym because I like it, because I know the coaches care about me. And I know you and I are saying the same thing, Marcus, but we just have to hammer that point home, is that that's what wins in the long run.
Yeah, we had Andrew Frezza from one of our clients on a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about his whole like rockstar coaching program. And what really stood out to me about this is that it wasn't about anything technical, really. All it was about getting the team bought into the same thing and focusing 100% on experience. Make the classes something that people are going to love showing up to and want to talk about. The programming and all that stuff comes afterwards. He's like, we even edit, even though I technically know this programming would be better than that programming, I'll make certain adjustments because of the experience in the class, the flow, and et cetera, to make the better experience. And like you said, no one cares if their back squat doesn't go up maybe quite as fast, or at all for that matter, if they look good, feel good, and are having fun.
Yeah, you got it. I really believe that you have to exclaim the model that you're trying to put out to the world, right? So if my model at OPEX is personalization, I know that our programming is going to beat group. I know it. Now, if I can't deliver a relationship and I can't deliver a great experience, I won't have enough time with the client to get the extra 5% marginal improvement that better programming because of specificity can give. I think these local group gyms are reversing that conversation and saying that whether it be programming or whether it be movement is the most important, and they're not building their gym off of a foundation of what will successfully bring the most number of correct, in quotes, candidates in to be clients. So the model has to exclaim what you're really doing. And of course, I believe that individual design is the most effective way to optimize a client. But if somebody doesn't come into the gym, they're not going to optimize anything. Right. So if I'm a group gym, I don't believe that model should be trying to win on optimizing programming, because you will lose to one-to-one.
Right.
But where you will beat one-to-one is in broad-based fun. I'm not going to beat you in fun. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's not what I'm trying to do.
Doing power raises by myself isn't quite as fun as the group thing, if that's what we're comparing, right?
Totally. And so that's where we can have this great conversation where I might believe that one-to-one is the best way of coaching. You might believe group's the best way of coaching. We're just offering different things, and we need to have a great conversation to say, how can we all succeed? Because at the end of the day, what's going to make us all the most successful is if more people do fitness.
Right. Exactly. It's a conversation. I mean, I've had this conversation many times about, well, what do you think about, individual design versus group? And it's like, the individual design diehards are like, oh, group sucks because ABC, and vice versa. And it's like, I disagree. I think that both need to exist. Both are important and both are valuable because both have a unique audience that it serves better. There are plenty of people who flat out are not ready for individual design. They don't have, whether it's the drive, they don't have the resources, they are just needing to change their relationship with fitness. They just want to be with their buddies and have fun. In which case a boot camp program or a CrossFit gym that's running a group program can be perfect for them. Right? And individual design, that is a totally different arena. It is better in what it's trying to accomplish, like you said, and that it has its whole own target audience. Those are the people like us, right? So those are the people who maybe started with group. We got a taste for it. I'm like, you know what? I really enjoy this. I've discovered fitness. That's fun for me. I want better now. I want it more personalized for me. And we move forward, right? So I think both need to exist. So I'm glad you brought that up the way that you did.
Yeah, and I think, hey, I came out of group. There's plenty of great
Most
things.
of us did, right?
Yeah, and so, I can't kick on that. I think the interesting thing that I'm finding more and more in terms of OPEX is if there's these categories, right, and this is my left. So on my left, you've got personal training, right, as one-to-one as you possibly could be. Right. And then on the right, you've got group training, where OPEX sits, and I know that this should have been just so clear to me day one, but it wasn't, because I'm dense. But we sit in the middle. But the thing that I've learned over the last couple of years is where we sit is here, which is right by personal training. Yeah. And so and this is good for every local gym, right? Because you have to define the niche that you're playing in, and you have to dominate the niche. I'm not actually trying to take any group training clients, right? What we want to define is that what we've done at OPEX is revolutionize personal training. And if somebody can understand that, it's like, oh, interesting. So what you do is a different version of personal training. It's like, yeah. And your people get to train in a small group setting. It's like, yeah. It's like, oh, that's interesting, right? But if I were to try to say that OPEX was directly competing with group, it's all subjective, right? Because it's a different experience. Different
game.
Exactly. And I think that in a group setting, I think too many owners are playing the wrong game.
100%. I say that all the time. Know the game you're trying to play so you can learn the rules and win. End of story. it's not about one game being right or wrong. There are multiple different games. Choose the one that you like, that resonates with you, whether it's the fun factor component, or it's part of your story, or it's the business model that you are going to like the most once you bring it to maturity, because I don't want to be so involved with people, or whatever it is. Pick it for all the right reasons. And once you've done that, then just figure out how to win that game. Well, and don't worry about what other people are doing. Don't worry about, whatever, right or wrong. Just stay in your lane, win that game, and rinse and repeat.
You got it. Yep. And that makes for a great career. That, by the way, the more clear the owner is on that, let's go right back to hiring, the better people you're going to have come in, because they're going to be clear on what they're trying to achieve.
No doubt. No doubt. Okay, so now let's go to the flip side of this coin. We're on the sunny side, hiring, everything's new and shiny and happy. Let's talk about firing, because this is something that sucks. When you first realize that you've got to fire someone and you maybe as equipped with the skills or the experience in how to do that. How do you even know when it's time to fire someone?
I have a sort of a framework. You can tell I'm a systems guy. I have kind of a framework that I like to go off of. And there's one side that I call the acute side. And I always give the example, like, if one of your coaches punches a client in the face for no reason, it's like, I don't need to think very hard about that. You're gone, and you're not coming back, right? Now, maybe there's some unforeseen reason and we can have a conversation, but you're probably not coming back after that. But if it's not acute, then I think it has to be ascended. And so I think what not enough gym owners are doing is having the right conversations early with the coach. So they're waiting for all this shit to fester. And then they're like, well, do I need to fire them? And then when I ask them, well, have you documented all of the other infractions that they've made? It's like, well, no, I haven't really had the conversation yet. Well, then you deserve for them to continue to be making infractions because you haven't discussed what's wrong. So exactly. The way that I would walk through the ascent would be, let's say that you have a warning phase, right? And this could be something fairly small. You don't set the alarm after you leave, right? Mm-hmm. No chance that you should fire somebody for missing that, but you should have a conversation with them. And back to your point, you should help them understand why, so that nobody walks in the gym and steals all of our shit so that we can't train people tomorrow, you know? So I think that there's something small that could be in the warning category, but you need to have that documented, and you need to have a conversation with the coach to educate them on how they can improve. Let's say that nothing happens for 3 months. I just throw the warning out at that point, right? It's just like, we had the conversation, we're good to go. But what happens if in 10 days after that first conversation, they do something a little bit more? So maybe I don't want to say yell at a client, but if they have a bad interaction with the client, we've seen that 1,000 times.
Suboptimal.
Right. So if they have an interaction that you would consider off of the standard operating procedure or badly reflecting on the brand, I think that now becomes an actual slap, if you will, right? That also needs to be documented. And let me be clear, when I say documented, I'm talking about a written email is okay, a written note that they, I don't want to say agree, but
acknowledge,
there we go. Like I said, dense, that they acknowledge that actually happened. Because you need this paper trail, and I get that some states are at will hiring states, and you technically can just fire somebody when you want, but don't be a dick about it. Like, actually walk through a process so that you've done the right things. And if that happens, they're now on like a probationary status because they've screwed up a couple of times and it's documented, and they should know that and know exactly what that means. And let's say that probationary status means if there's another infraction in the next 3 months, they're going to be fired. And I know that can sound harsh, but the problem is that they need to understand that they can't act that way, and they can't take actions that are against the brand or against the rules that have been set out, as long as the rules were set up. Right. So as long as this ascent is consistent, as long as it is documented, and as long as you're having helpful conversations with the coach, you shouldn't just slap a coach and walk away. You should try to take it as an opportunity to help them improve, because you're assuming that they're the right coach that you think can get the job done. If you don't think that they can get the job done, you should part ways sooner, because you're going to act with angst and they're probably going to resent you for it. So if you walk through that and then let's say they were to make that last error, I think you have to stick to your guns, meaning I think that you have to fire them because they have walked through these infractions and, you've documented them and they've continued to make these infractions. Now, what are all of those infractions? Good luck. Nobody's going to be able to put everything onto a page. It's impossible. But you have to try to umbrella what these infractions might look like. So am I going to fire a coach if they're 5 minutes late? I think that depends on the exact owner. So in my gyms, I gave a coach one shot, meaning if they were late once, I said, you do it again, you're out, because of how important that experience was to me as a coach. I never had a coach do it twice. Now, maybe I was just lucky, but I was so clear with them, you do it again, you're gone. And it never happened again. I don't care if they need to set 3 alarms. It's not my problem.
Right.
But I want to make sure that they understand what's going on. And to your point, I need to explain to them why it's so important for them to be on time. So if you walk through that and then they can't follow it, I think it's time for them to go.
All right. Time to fire someone. What would you say is the best way to go about doing that?
You said it right up front. It sucks to fire people. If it doesn't suck for you, you might be a tough SOB, but I think that a couple of things need to happen. You need to have somebody in the room with you whenever you can. And no, it's not from a protectionary standpoint, but let's hope that never goes, too badly. It's for a paper trail standpoint. And we can say what we want, or we can try to claim we're a small business and we didn't know. That's not going to work, if you make a big mistake and somebody comes after you for it. So you really need to have somebody in the room when you make the firing. The second thing is that because it sucks so bad to fire people, sometimes people take forever to actually do it. They take 15 minutes to get to the point. No, you need to get to the point right away because there's probably this weird tension that's happening right away. And so you just need to get out with it and then move about the conversation. And then you need to be really clear. I've heard coaches do this and I walked out of the room and I was like, I don't know what you just did. And I know it sounds crazy, but I bet you everybody on this call is like, yeah, I've done that.
Yeah, totally.
Because it sucks to fire people. So you have to be very clear. And then assuming that you had a coach sign a contract, I would advise that you have them sign another document.
Termination.
Exactly. So that it's understood. And that just goes right back to paper trailing the assent. That's what real businesses do. And if we want to be a real business, we should run that way. Is it a little bit more black and white and maybe not as Berenstein Bears and butterflies and rainbows?
Berenstein Bears, good reference.
It's a little bit less fun to walk through that. It is a little bit more work. But if you take the time to educate along this ascent, if you take the time to do the steps the right way, you will improve the experience that you have with your coaches and your staff over time, which is really the goal. Because wherever somebody is today, you're just trying to get better.
Right. And I think when you're talking to someone who's newer to the game and they have not yet had a serious negative repercussion from this going wrong, right? A really bad hire that does something that totally creates an exodus with members or tarnishes the reputation. You're on, Yelp or Rip-Off Report or something crazy happens. You're like, oh my God, I never thought to put the effort in on the front end. Or who has a bad firing experience where then there's all sorts of fallout afterwards or someone's coming back with legal issues. They don't realize that this is for, you're hedging your own bet. You're making this better for literally everyone. And, you don't know what you don't know. But if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, oh man, like you said, this sounds like a lot of red tape and a lot of formalities. Like I want this to be way more like a family environment. I get it. But that structure enables that to happen and be healthy rather than to be these gray areas. And it starts out all rosy and honeymoon, but then those little mini infractions and those tensions start to build. And you could potentially sink your own battleship with an error here, right? And I think people don't necessarily understand how serious the fallout can be of a poor hire, from what it can do like while they're still working for you and the things that they can create. Because remember, relationship business, you could have someone poisoning your well from inside and it can ruin everything, which also brings up the whole point of like coaches leaving to start their own gyms. Like that goes back to the very beginning of our conversation about the whole like casting the vision and, you know, and having that dialogue with someone and the why and building value around your business and them being a part of a mission. I did an episode series with Jason Fernandez from CrossFit Rife about a year ago about onboarding, hiring, training, and all this. And that was one of the main points he was driving home as well was, look, like this, if that happens to you, you did it to yourself. Almost always that could have been circumvented simply by having built a better relationship, had a better mutual respect going, better dialogue to where it's like, hey, look, if your goal eventually is to open a gym, how can I help you? How can I either prepare you for that? Or maybe, hey, look, we're actually looking to open a second location down the road. I'd love if you can prove your stripes in here, you're the man. Like I need a person like that. Yeah. Right. It's an opportunity to bypass that whole set of issues.
Yeah, it's almost the difference between being proactive and reactive. And let's look at Salesforce.com, right? Mm-hmm. It's a company that almost everybody knows at this point, big player, tech world. Mm-hmm. And you ask yourself, it's always, you know, reported as one of the best places in the world to work.
Yep. Good buddy of mine works there. Yep.
Yeah. Do you think that they're not walking through this ascent process in their HR? And all these gym owners think that this rosy exterior is not met with very tight procedures inside, and that's wrong. Mm-hmm. It's just wrong. So I think that a lot of local gym owners got into owning a gym because it was passionate for them. Mm-hmm. And that's cool. But if you want to grow a business that will be worth anything at the end of the day, and if you want to actually take cash from that business over time, you're going to have to put procedures in place. And I would tell you that you get the right people on board, your business will grow fast.
Yep, no doubt about it. All right. So last question on the firing deal. You know, how do you deal with that emotion that comes with this part of the job? Because I think, you know, I actually have a couple of staff members here. They all run their own facilities as well, and had to go through some pretty gnarly firing experiences very recently. And we're just kind of really set back with how heavy it felt when they had someone who was, you know, 6-year tenured coach at their facility who they were like, man, I was planning on opening another facility with that person and something went really wrong and they had to let them go. And they I mean, literally physically feeling ill about this. I mean, it's like breaking up with someone who you thought you were in a good relationship with. I mean, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think that where I have felt the worst was when I had to fire somebody for the right reasons, but I felt like I didn't help them enough to fix the things that were broken.
Right. So, you could have prevented it for them.
Yeah, I don't know if I could have prevented it, but maybe I could have given them a better shot. And sometimes, obviously, that's just an emotional reaction that you're going to have internally, no matter if you did everything. But the ones that I actually don't think should feel as emotional are when people do something acutely negative to the business and you have to take action. So I want to be the person on this show to say, you shouldn't feel bad about firing somebody if they need to be fired, but you need to make sure that you're putting something in place to help those folks who just don't know better. Mm-hmm. So as long as you're doing that, if you've taken all those steps and they still can't get it, you should now feel a lot less emotional about it. Now, let me just go to the broad question and say, how can you feel better about it? I think if you have to fire somebody, it should be for cause, right? Like if there's a reason to fire somebody, you need to take action or else your whole business could potentially go down. Mm-hmm. And so I like to look at it more in that light. And a lot of people think I'm very black and white. I've had to fire a number of people. It always sucks having to do it because I'm worried about what, you know, like how they're going to feel behind it. Mm-hmm. But I always need to ask myself, and now I ask, you know, other people on my team, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Here's what we've taken action on. Here's how we've tried to help. Where are we on this person? And I think that having a conversation with somebody else is really beneficial to walk through to make sure that your thinking is on point. Mm-hmm. And that helps take away a lot of the emotion. And don't just go to somebody who's going to be a yes man, right? Like you got to go to somebody who's going to actually take you through it. And I've had some conversations where people have said, dude, you're not seeing the real issue that's going on here. And I have to be open enough and humble enough to be like, wow, you're right. Mm-hmm. And so if you walk through the ascent if you have the conversation with other folks who are outside of your direct, line of sight with this person, you should be able to understand if the decision is the best that it could be. And as long as you're making the decision that is the best for the business, I think that it's okay. Awesome, man. Great advice. And all around, I just want to say thank you for everything that you've brought to this show today. It's like you OPEX guys know what you're talking about. I tell you what. I hope so. Jim, I want to thank you for being on this show today and diving into this subject and really sharing so much wisdom with our audience today. That was so helpful. This is a powerhouse show. I think this is going to add a ton of value to our listeners and viewers out there. So final question I'd like to ask everyone. In one sentence, if you could ever give one piece of advice to a gym owner, what would it be? Play the long game. Love it. And there's a lot underneath that, but I'll leave it at play the long game. And I really appreciate you having me on, Marcus. I have a feeling you and I could go days of conversation. It would be really fun. So I really appreciate you having me on. Awesome, man. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Where can people find more about you and about OPEX? Yeah, opexfit.com is our main website, and then OPEX Fitness on Instagram, and then I'm just Crowell Jim. Just Jim Crowell right on Instagram, and happy to engage with anybody who's got questions. And I already posted a little something in where Jessica posted in the Facebook group. I'm happy to engage if people have some more questions, so just let me know. Awesome, man. Jim, thanks again for taking the time with us here today. And I want to thank all of you motivated gym owners out there for joining us today. Again, if you're listening to this via podcast, be sure to check out the video version of this interview along with the extensive show notes at gymwright.com. And if you're enjoying the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Your support means the world to us. Also, if you'd like to watch the show live, you can join the conversation every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time right here in the network. Thanks again for your support. Now get out there and build something that matters. We'll see you guys again next week. Bye-bye.